Before Sunday, I felt this Rangers team needed tens of millions thrown at it to have a chance of competing against Celtic. After seeing the performance, it could be £100 million. If you brought in 10 players on 15 to 20 grand a week for the next 3 years, including transfer fees, that could gobble up £70 million. But that's the kind of investment that's now needed. They are so far behind their city rivals, it's incredible. Ibrox chairman Dave King certainly didn't do his side's chances of pulling off a shock much good with his words last week. We all know Rangers are a massive club, with a huge support, who need to challenge for titles. But for him to say the next manager has to win the title not only puts massive pressure on the team that's out there right now, but also the new man coming in. Would the scale of the investment required put off some prospective managers? 100%. It put Eric McInnes off. I'm just not sure they have enough money to invest in a top manager to compete with Brendan Rodgers and invest in the squad. Let's be honest, the game was men against boys. The 2 previous meetings had created the illusion that Rangers were closing the gap. But Celtic were out on their feet in the draw at Parkhead around New Year. They clearly needed a rest. In the last game, they were down to 10 men, dominated for large parts of the second half and still won 3-2. But when it all comes together, as it did on Sunday, they are just streets ahead of Rangers. I just don't think any Celtic player would have come away thinking that it was a hard game. These matches are always competitive in the first 10 minutes as everyone is trying to find their feet and get that little edge. But you could tell right from the off that Rangers weren't going to play the kind of tactics that served them so well at Ibrox, namely put the Celtic back 4 under pressure and try to get in their faces. I saw James Tavernier on Sky talking about the importance of pressing, but it was nothing of the kind. They put an extra man in midfield in Andy Halliday, but everyone just stood off and didn't know who to pick up. Tom Rogic couldn't believe the amount of space and time he had before scoring that goal. Ross McCrory was the closest one to him at the opening goal, but when you are playing as a number 10, you expect a midfielder to be in touch with you. Rangers didn't look as if they wanted to win the game. It was more of a containment plan. I was also amazed that Kenny Miller didn't play any part. There is definitely unrest in the camp, which is understandable when you've got a chairman coming out with statements such as he did in the week of a big game. You could see the frustration with 2 players, Halliday and Daniel Candias, coming off. I've been there, so I know what it's like. And at no point would I have done that if everything was rosy. You do it at your worst time. To see 2 players do it in the one game says a lot. Whether or not Halliday was mouthing off at his manager or a supporter, it's certainly come about through sheer frustration. He's a massive Rangers fan who plays with his heart on his sleeve and is desperate to win. To be taken off in a pretty embarrassing way before halftime has just ignited something inside him. To be made the scapegoat by being taken off, I can understand the frustration. But the bottom line is that, when I did it, it wasn't right, and it wasn't right in his case. I understand why it's happened, but there's a time and a place for it. Rangers were going nowhere when Halliday was taken off. Graham Morty had to change something in terms of tactics or personnel. But I didn't get the decision to sub Candias. He has been playing really well. He's got numerous assists and has certainly got better as a player since going there. But the trouble with whatever game plan Morty came up with to try and stop Celtic is Rodgers' side have so many different ways of hurting you. Stop Scott Brown? They'll get at you another way via Callum McGregor or Rogic. Stop all 3? What about James Forrest or Mikel Lustig? What about Kieran Tierney? Then there's the 3 players who came on, Patrick Roberts, Lee Griffiths and Scott Sinclair. You can't just be a containing team. You need so many different plans. I can't even begin to work out why David Bates has been allowed to walk out of the door at Ibrox to sign for Hamburg. The money that has been quoted in terms of his wage demands is not mega bucks. If you consider the players they've brought in and the wages they threw at them when Pedro Caixinha was there, it's just not unreasonable. If you can't offer $7,000 to a player who's probably been your best center half this season, what on earth are they going to offer to someone else they are looking to sign? It's crazy. As a young Scot growing up, if you support Celtic or Rangers, it's your dream to play for those clubs and stay there for the rest of your career. Kieran Tierney would play for free for Celtic if he had to. For a club to be in a position where they can afford to give a player the minimum salary for an old firm player is waving the white flag. Rangers have made a habit of losing good Scottish players like Bates. Barry McKay and Danny Wilson also walked out the door. These are Rangers fans, Scottish players who knew what it was all about. Boys, you could build something around for the future. For a club like Rangers not to offer a guy like Bates $7,000 a week is pathetic. With both Aberdeen and Rangers now out of the Scottish Cup, the race for second place in the Premiership has certainly heated up. If either club were to miss out on second having not made a cup final, that would be a disastrous season. Yet, neither will have gained any confidence from their displays in the semi-finals. Aberdeen were simply woeful against Motherwell. The mistakes the central defenders made, in particular Kerry Arneson, We're inexcusable. This is a guy who's been to the Euros and now has a ticket to the World Cup. If an international center-half is going to make those kind of mistakes, it doesn't matter who's going to come back into the team. To have a platform to win any game, you need to be solid defensively. They weren't at the races at both ends. They lacked creativity in the middle of the park. Stevie May looks so low on confidence. Adam Rooney is never going to score from left wing, and Greg Stewart doesn't look the same player who moved from Dundee to Birmingham. They look like a team lacking ideas and leadership. Derek McInnes questioned the mental strength of his players after the game. If I'm a striker, knowing there's that worry with the center halves, already I'm calculating that I'll need to score 2 or 3 goals to give us a chance of winning. So the mental issue won't just be with the defense, it will be throughout the team. That's a real worry for McInnes, as that's not something you can just change on a training field.